When I was in high school, I went to the movies with a girlfriend. Specifically, I remember the movie being The Ugly Truth. It was a crappy night outside, massive thunderstorm, and windy as hell. Usually, I like to go and pick a good seat. This is before you could pre-select your seats online, and then take turns going to concession. When we entered the theater, it was empty. When you're a teenage girl and you're in an empty movie theater, what do? You take out your flip phone and start taking selfies. As we are deciding if we even want to get snacks for the movie, the lights flicker. We were a little creeped out, but obviously it was from the storm. Then in walks this guy, maybe in his 30s. He's wearing a backpack and his clothes are a little dirty. He immediately looks at us and says,
"Uh-oh, two beautiful girls and one guy in a movie theater. You know what that means."
No, actually, we don't. My friend and I give each other a weird look and just tried to laugh it off awkwardly. We pretend to look at stuff on our phones when the guy walks into our row and sits directly beside me. Doesn't even leave one seat in between. He starts making small talk, and I'm obviously uncomfortable, and I'm kind of leaning towards my friend so this guy can't see my phone. I'm texting her like, WTF, we need to leave. This is weird. And she replies like, oh, it's probably nothing. He tries to make small talk, and I reply with one-word answers. This guy then asks if we have boyfriends. I immediately say no and instantly regret my decision. My friend replied with yes. He is more interested in me now. I was so mad at myself, but I was very nervous. This guy continues to talk about how bad the storm is outside and says that it reminds him of the movie Twister. This immediately makes my anxiety worse. I have a really bad fear of being stuck in a tornado or whatever. I feel like I'm about to have an anxiety attack. This time, I turn to my friend and say, I want popcorn, let's go get some. Before she has the chance to answer me, he says,
"Well, it's a good thing they don't frisk you when you come in here, since I have a knife in my pocket."
And he chuckles. I immediately stood up, looked at my friend, and said, let's go, I want popcorn. She stood up and followed me. At this point, there's still no one else in the theater. We walked calmly in front of the screen, and as soon as we turned the corner, we bolted. My friend immediately called her mom, who then told us to tell someone at the theater. The manager came over, we explained the situation, and he called the police. Now, this movie theater was the spot that everyone in my high school worked at. There were a few staff members and the manager standing around us. You could see everyone staring, and I was so embarrassed. The police arrived and spoke with us. It was a male and female officer. The male officer was obviously annoyed and didn't believe us. The female officer didn't seem to either. They go in the theater to find the creepy guy. About 15 minutes later, they come back. The male officer has nothing to say, but the female officer told us that he had a pocket knife on him, and they escorted him out of the theater. She reassured us that we did the right thing, that he did seem quite creepy, and she would have done the same thing in our situation. This made me feel a bit better. As the officer is done talking with us, I see my friend's mom, who is quite short, yelling and shaking her finger at the manager. I get embarrassed again. And then he gives us like 5 free movie passes each. He invited us back to the theater to finish the movie, and I just said no thanks, and asked them to take me home. I still haven't watched that movie. Okay, so this happened about a year ago. I'm in a long-distance relationship and I often fly to visit. I didn't have a ride arranged to come pick me up, so I usually use Lyft or Uber to get to and from the airport. This particular ride started off fine. The guy was from Haiti, I believe he said, so he had a very thick accent that was often hard to understand. The beginning of the ride was just him making small talk like most drivers do. Where are you flying from? Are you in college? Do you have family here? And so on. We get on the freeway and there's lots of traffic. I had a layover flight and of course, all the outlets were in use, so I couldn't charge my phone. I'm hoping this traffic lightens up because I really need to keep in contact with the people I'm going to be staying with. Of course, with my luck, the app crashes and says, "You have arrived," while we're literally in the middle of the freeway near no houses at all. I get kind of annoyed and the driver says he'll pull over at this Walmart nearby to figure out what's wrong. Apparently he had a very old phone and it wasn't giving proper directions, but I said that we could use mine, but I needed to charge it. He asked me to sit up front so it was easier, and I thought nothing of it, so I did go up front. He tells me that he will take me the rest of the way for free without using the Lyft app. I put the address in, and we're back on our way. As we're pulling out of the Walmart parking lot, he asks me how old I am. I told him I had just turned 18, and that's when things got kind of weird. He seemed to lighten up at how young I was, which was a bit odd, but whatever. He then asks me a series of questions like,
Why don't you live here in this state? You should move here. You could go to college here, so why don't you? I'm a doctor, and Lyft is just a side job so I have money.
This man was at least in his mid-40s. I told him that I had no money to just randomly move to the States and start college, seeing as I had just become a legal adult. He then told me,
I can take care of you. I'll buy you a little apartment and a nice car, and take you out and pay for your college.
I thought he was joking, so I kind of awkwardly laughed and said, that's okay, he didn't need to do that. But he kept insisting, and I was getting kind of creeped out. I really didn't want to jump to conclusions. I thought maybe he's just not sure how to hold a proper conversation since he's foreign or something. About 20 minutes later, we are about 5 minutes from my destination. My phone kept doing that annoying charging, not charging thing that phones do when the charger wires are loose. I had this phone a while, so it did this at times, and apparently hadn't really been charging it much at all, and it died. Since we were so close to the destination though, I told him that I knew the rest of the way. But I'd tell him to turn right, and he'd say,
Okay,
and purposely turn left or keep going straight. Anything but what I told him to do. Now we're lost because he's ignoring everything I'm saying and playing it all off as an accident, and I'm not super familiar with the entire area. I only knew a small portion of streets. He tells me he lives nearby, and I start getting really scared because I think he's going to kidnap me or something. I let out a single tear, and then I tell myself to keep it together because in the movies, whenever they see fear, they get mad or something, so I'm trying to make it seem like I'm not losing my shit. Finally, he turns back around, and when we're almost there again, he starts purposely going the wrong way again. At this point, I got my phone to about 5%. He reaches over while at a red light and grabs my phone and rates himself 5 stars on Lyft and friends me on Facebook. He also puts his number in my phone and tells me to call him if I ever need anything, and that we should go out sometime. I give a little fake smile so he doesn't know I'm about to shit myself from fear. Eventually, I get so fed up that I just jump out at another red light and tell him, "Thanks, but you're really scaring me. Bye." I call my boyfriend on my 5% battery life and tell him where I am because I'm really scared and I need him to pick me up. My Lyft driver is shouting out of the window for me to get back in the car, but there is no way in hell I was going back in there to be some man's sugar baby that was a total stranger at that. I go somewhere with lots of people and wait for my boyfriend. This whole ordeal made the ride last about 2.5 hours, no exaggerations, and it should have taken 45 minutes even with traffic. Later I called Lyft and told them everything. He was supposedly fired, so that's good. Anyway, random Lyft driver looking for a young sugar baby to kidnap? Let's not meet again. When I was 5, my family attended a church with 2 stories. Downstairs were the nursery and Sunday school rooms. Upstairs, the main church room where the service was held, as well as some offices, a kitchen, and a library. The main doors opened into a stairwell connecting the 2 levels. After Sunday school, kids would either continue playing downstairs until their parents came to get them, or, if they were old enough and impatient to go home like me, could go find their parents upstairs and try and convince them to stop talking and leave. My mom would spend what felt like hours talking to people after the service, so sometimes I'd go up and down the stairs a couple times, up to ask if we could leave, back down to play when she said not yet, repeat again maybe 10 minutes later. One Sunday, during one of my trips up the stairs, there was an elderly couple standing outside the glass doors, smiling and waving at me. I remember thinking maybe they'd been locked out somehow and wanted to come in, which was a silly thing to think about since the doors were never locked during the hours the church was open. Wanting to be helpful, I went in and opened the door and told them that they could come in. Turns out they didn't want to come in and instead told me that they were my grandparents there to pick me up. That confused me as I was familiar with both sets of grandparents, and these people were not either. I told them that no, they weren't my grandparents. At that point, I was thinking that they'd just had me confused with another kid and said so. They then quickly stated that they meant that they were my great-grandparents, and we hadn't met since I was a baby, so I wouldn't remember them, and my parents had asked them to drive me home since they were busy. Even if I hadn't been smart enough to realize they could have just come in if they wanted, that at least seemed odd to me, and even as they protested, it wasn't necessary. I said I was going to go ask my parents and headed up the stairs. My mom was still talking to a group of other churchgoers, but after literally tugging on her sleeve for probably a minute, I was able to get her attention and announce loudly, and at that point probably impatiently, that my great-grandparents were there to pick me up and I was supposed to go with them. She looked confused, and then concerned, and told me my great-grandparents were not there to pick me up since they were all dead, which pretty quickly put a stop to the discussion about raising money for a stained glass window or whatever. My mom and some other adults went with me back to the door, but the couple was no longer there. Since I couldn't really describe them any better than old, white hair, looked friendly, but not my grandparents, it was just sort of easily put down for them mistaking me for someone else. From then on, despite my impatience to leave, I stayed downstairs until my parents came and got me. I remember being concerned about it for a while, but my mom would discourage discussing it, saying they had made a mistake. It's possible that's all it was, but I've always remembered that it felt wrong how insistent they were that they were there to pick me up.